All right. Hi, everyone. I hope you're ready to start. I'm Jasmine, your host for this session. Thank you for tuning in to this session. Um, it's entitled Admission Trends for U.S. Admissions. And this session is brought to you by LIMS Review Center, the Princeton Review Philippines, AUG Philippines, and AECC Philippines. This live talk will give an overview on how admissions trends have changed in the past 10 to 20 years, most especially in the past few years. The speaker will discuss the factors for change, how Filipino students are affected by this, and how they can use this information to their advantage. Before we proceed with this talk, let's lay down the house rules. Please do not spam the Q&A box or send any inappropriate messages. Everyone at camp is working very hard to make sure your conference experience is amazing, so please be respectful at all times. And finally, all questions must be sent in the Q&A box. Questions in the chat box might get lost in all the messages. Now that you're familiar with the house rules, I'm excited to introduce our esteemed speaker for this session. Sang-Won Lee, or Simon, has taught and guided thousands of students into top universities around the world throughout his career. He has special expertise in standardized tests and college admissions, and is particularly passionate about aligning students past and present all the way through their college, postgrad, and career considerations. He started the Princeton Review Philippines office in 2015, and since has overseen many of the top scorers and top university matriculators in Manila. He's a graduate of International School Manila, Duke University, where he earned his bachelor's, and INSEAD, where he earned his MBA. A virtual round of applause for Simon.
All right. Yeah, thank you guys for having me. All right, so let me just share this first. Okay, I assume everyone can see the presentation. If any issues at any point, yeah, like someone just raise their hand, or if you guys can just message me. All right, so I have a short time with you guys. I think I have 30 minutes. So let's just jump right into it. Yeah, this is a little bit of a snapshot of my background, just to contextualize a little bit this talk. And if anyone has any like particular questions about maybe specific schools or certain exams or whatever, really, feel free to shoot those out as well. But yeah, so I'm Korean American, but I did spend most of my life in the Philippines. I grew up there. I was K-12 at ISM, so I do have a pretty relevant experience and perspective on also, I think, what you guys are all going through right now. Okay, before we get into the trends, I normally start these things with a icebreaker quiz. I normally have 4 questions that I ask, but because of our time constraint, I'm just going to ask 2. So the first one, and you guys can all just think about this. You don't need to answer this in the chat. Like, how many colleges, universities are there in US? So this is just US. This is not, Canada, Asia, not global, just US alone. Okay, so like 100, 1,000, 1 million, like whatever number you're thinking of. The answer is 4,000 to 5,000. Okay, and why I wanted to start with this point was more to stress. You guys may have heard this theme a lot already up to this point. I caught the tail end of the last talk, and you guys were talking about like scam colleges, and for sure there are a lot of those as well. But there are so many good quality institutions, not just in the US but around the world, right? So I guess I bring this up also because a lot of students and parents I meet, they're very fixated on the top 10, the top 50, right? The top, in rarer cases, the top 100, right? So I encourage you guys to expand that the radius a little bit more, and depending on your situation, right? Consider there are many schools who will give you scholarships you need, who will give you the financial aid you need, right? It's just a matter of, I guess, how possibly how wide you might be looking. You see, so some examples of, especially in the US, these are brand name universities in the US. These are very popular schools, not super hard to get into, right? While still being pretty prestigious. Okay. Second question, this is question 4 here, but second question, what's the most important factor? I imagine through this week, you guys have heard a lot, right, about how much you have to prepare for these apps. Depending on where you apply, it's a different amount of requirements, or different number of requirements you need to fulfill. So the answer to this is not the only requirement, but the most important one, right, is your grades. Okay, and with that, this will be a good segue into trends that have been going on. Yeah, I know the instruction was 10 to 20 years, but this is more focused on the last 2 years, as would be most relevant to you guys. Okay, so yeah, the way I structured this presentation is trends through headlines, right? So you guys don't even have to take my word for it. You can just see through like news headlines, right? Like stuff that's going on in the admissions world. Okay, so we talked about grades being most important. Unfortunately, over COVID, um, grade inflation apparently was a thing. I noticed this myself, right? In that I consult a lot of kids around the Philippines as well, and definitely some schools, like specific schools, I can definitely vouch for this having happened. I can't like put my finger down on why this happened. Maybe it's guilt from the teacher's part. I don't know. Maybe it's cheating from home or everything was remote. Whatever the case, there's been great inflation, like as a general trend. So that makes actually life more difficult for applicants, right? If you just Google news, I Googled this like several months ago. I don't know what the new like set of articles would look like, but this has been a pretty common phenomenon, I think, throughout the world. Okay, and so if you think about that, right, you think about, I think like there was also a surge in applications, fixed limited spots, where you had all these deferrals, right? Students deciding to like students who got in who pushed right their like their date of enrollment to the following year, and in some schools that actually really had an impact on the freshman pool that they could take the next year, right? Some schools it didn't really matter, some schools it did matter. um, like test prep changed a lot, right? The SAT, this is 2021, but they got rid of their subject test, they got rid of their essay. If you guys are preparing for SAT now, you guys would know, um, what is it? They became computerized this year, right? It's like a pretty new format than exam, and then there's a lot of schools that became test optional, and then now that are requiring again, right? There's some schools that are test blind, right? So with all this chaos, you saw also like a mix of more applications, admissions rates plummeting, um, chaos all around. Okay. So not surprisingly, acceptance rates have, you know, just fallen through the floor. Yeah, like what would be a good example? So I went to Duke, and you can see here it's 6%. I think when I got in, this was like 15 years ago or so. When I got in, I think it was like 15%, right? So while it's not like you can't really say it's like 2.5 times harder, or however what proportion you want to create there, it's definitely a lot more competitive now, right? And it's increasingly so every year. Even when I compare the students applying now to 5 years ago, I already feel like the bar is already a little bit higher, right? The standards are just getting more and more intense. Okay. Um, so with that, there's if you guys just look online, there's all kinds of like media quotes and things from deans and people on the admissions team who always talk about how for like every one student they accept, right, there are like several others who they would have been just as happy to take in, right? It's just unfortunate that they don't have an infinite number of seats to give out, right? So there's something to be said about like a little bit of luck and subjectivity in the process, right? Of course, most of it is not luck, right? But there's something to be said about them having to make really tough decisions, right? And then that's where like the sharp fit, right? And so these intangibles can really come into play. Yeah, generally a lot of uncertainty. One of the trends that we're going to see later, right? Waitlist numbers have gone up a lot, right? Deferrals from early have gone up a lot. Um, there's just a lot of uncertainty all around, even from the colleges side, right? They don't know who's going to accept their spot, who's going to defer. Okay, another trend that I think is also definitely very relevant to pretty much every student around the world. Tuition costs have just been going up and up and up, right? I mean, this is just natural with inflation, but I think costs of especially the more popular higher ed institutions, I think they've been like outpacing inflation by a good amount. It's getting very expensive to attend these good schools. But you can see in this article, right? Of course, Fortune magazine would say it's still worth it. I agree. I agree personally that it is still worth it, right? You land a good job in the U.S. mid-career, you'll make. I mean, you can make, like what, like 4 or 5 years of your tuition in 1 year, right? You could, right? U.S. in particular, if you crack that market. Um, So, okay, another big theme has been even the controversies around rankings, right? How reliable are rankings? Columbia, great institution, right? Like a mainstay in the top 10 for I don't know how many decades. They fell out into the 18th spot. I want to say it was last year because they apparently provided some falsified data. I don't remember if it was intentional or if it was just an accident. Um, Either way, right? They fell out of it, and there's always like what is it? These schools are like trying to like jockeying to get into higher positions, right? Because they're going to get more applicants that way. Um, and with that, right, this also came out last year. This is law school, so not related to you guys, but like Yale and Harvard and a number of other prestigious law schools, they pulled out of the rankings. They were upset with I think how the rankings were starting to like what is it, the standards they were setting, right, for you to be able to rank yourself higher. And they stopped this, they didn't want to play the game anymore. So a lot of these schools backed out. Undergrad, maybe we'll follow at some point. It's hard to say, right? So I guess all in all, it's my thought on this is yeah, the rankings, take it with a grain of salt. It's a very good guide. If you guys are trying to avoid scam schools, the US News is I think quite reliable, especially through the first like top 100, top 200 schools, right? There's not going to be a single scam school on like in the top 200 US News rankings. Um, okay, scandals, right, is another big theme. I personally like. I found this story really funny. So again, I'm Korean ethnicity wise, even though I'm like really not Korean at all. But I found this really funny because it's such a Korean parent thing to do. They petitioned through change.org. I think they passed 50,000. It caught me the attention of like many media sources. I think there were like the justice minister's daughter got into MIT, and then they're saying she like they have like proof that she like falsified all this stuff in her app. Um, and it's funny that this prompted a response from MIT, who said they were going to review it, and then they stood by their decision. A lot of controversy around this too. There's no way MIT, in a sense, could like would if they start looking into all of these kinds of things, they have to look into it for everybody, right? You're going to start seeing everybody complain about, they're like competitor or rival's child, right, who got into the school, and then it's just going to become this crazy mess. So it's just funny, right, to see this stuff happening. Yeah, and scandals to in Stanford, and to I know about Harvard and Brown and USC, right, the famous Netflix scandal. There's all kinds of things like this that happen, definitely for decades, right? But even the last several years, this is just something, I guess, but that reflects the real world, right? Unfortunately, right, the world is not perfect, and these things do happen here and there. So it's not really an admissions trend, but it's more just like stuff that happens in the world. So of course, there's most legitimate things that happen. Unfortunately, there's a lot of gray area, a lot of exaggeration, etc., which I don't encourage any of you guys to do. Right, and there's of course some stuff that's just not cool too, right? That goes on in the background. More data that I think is more relevant to you guys. I didn't know this myself until I like was preparing this presentation for this talk. But this is UC's, all the UC's, not just Berkeley, LA. But this is like Berkeley, LA, San Diego, Santa Barbara, Davis, etc. All the UC's combined. I believe this was 2019. Um, yeah, so Philippines, right, as a demographic, they had, I think in this case, the lowest, right, the lowest percent admitted. I'm not sure why, like what's behind this, but just to understand, I guess, what the trend or the data has been like to this point. In this Berkeley specifically, they were the second lowest, right, among the cultural groups. It's so in the end, it's just a statistic. It doesn't, right, case to case by case. It of course, your individual application is what matters the most, right? But just interesting trend. Biggest news, right, the past month or so, affirmative action, right? Affirmative action is, I don't think they implemented it quite yet, but I guess soon it's going to be banned, right? Like admission officers cannot use affirmative action anymore um, to pick their candidates, right? Pick their students, and I guess the jury's still out as far as how exactly the consequences are going to, like how it's all going to roll out in the next 10, 20 years, right? How will this affect? I don't think if you guys are like rising seniors, right? You guys are applying in a few months. I don't think this will affect anything. But yeah, if there's some freshmen here, or if you have siblings who are younger, this could have some effect, right, on the strategy and what you want to do, maximize your chances. Yeah, so a good case related to this is the UCs. And the UCs, I guess a few decades ago, they stopped affirmative action in their own campuses. And with that, yeah, like you see in the second paragraph, right, Black and Latino admissions fell drastically. Right, the minority group admissions. So, yeah, depending on like which side of the boat you're on, I guess this could be a good or bad thing. Okay, but with all this happening, I don't think any school is like anti-diversity, right? I think they will still, like every school, will still be very pro-diversity. It's just more diversity can be shown in many ways, right? So I think, yeah, affirmative action being so focused on race, right, as a demographic, I think that's what the Supreme Court is just saying, no, we cannot do. Okay, so yeah, there's some belief that it could make things actually more complicated, more subjective. On the flip side, you have already retaliation, right? You have some colleges that are now, okay, you're going to take away affirmative action. All right, we're going to take away legacy admissions, right? Which was actually, I don't know how you guys all feel about legacy admissions, but this is not even necessarily like colleges didn't look at this as an unethical thing. They didn't look at this as a bad thing in the past, right? Legacy admissions is like if you have a parent or a sibling who went to that school, it gives you an advantage to get in, right? It's definitely a real thing. Again, it wasn't looked at as a bad thing, but you see now more and more, right? The U.S. in particular is trying to make things fairer for everyone, right? So they're trying to get rid of these different like privilege advantages. Standardized tests. Okay, so still, the bulk of the students won't require. It's optional. This started really because of COVID, right? And COVID, I guess, with the lingering effects of it, they're still just keeping it optional, right? And I guess partially, well, primarily why they did this is they didn't want anyone to not be able to apply anymore, right? Like these colleges, they would love it if every single student in the world applied to their school, right? Not only would they make a lot of money through the app fees, but they would also their yield rates, right? Sorry, not their yield rates. So their acceptance rates would be extremely low, right? If everyone applied to their college, right? So I think this is probably going to persist for a while, this optional trend. So you guys would need to look into it, right? Because there are some schools who already require it. More and more, when COVID hit, a lot of schools just preemptively were like, okay, until 2024, until 2025, we're optional for sure. So in the coming years, you're going to see more and more schools go back to required. For now, the majority are still optional. And then there's some schools that are now test compliant, meaning even if you send it in, even if you got a perfect, doesn't matter, right? You could slip it into your app if you wanted. You could mention it, additional information. They are not allowed to consider it, right? So even when they discuss your app, they're just going to ignore it. At least that's their policy. I mean, in the end, they're human beings, so I don't know. They might factor it in, right? But yeah, schools on the right, policy, they will not even consider it. This one I'll just skip. This is everything I just talked about. That was just explaining the optional test plan thing. Okay, that said, right, if you can get a good score, it shows your ability potential, you should send it, right? So UChicago, they actually went test optional in 2018. They went test optional way before COVID even hit. But you can see on their website, they still encourage you to take it, right? If it is a part of your story, if it shows you in a good light, yeah, do it. Okay, so for those who maybe for budget reasons or just standardized tests are just really not your thing, you don't really want to spend a few months like focusing on this thing, and you feel like the rest of your app is strong enough to, maybe, make up for a lack of an SAT score. Yeah, then you're going to be okay. It depends, right, on your app. Right, Princeton test optional right now, but yeah, on their website, literally, right? It's like you still see it as important. Okay, so yeah, just like a quick summary. Um, Enrollment initially plummeted, but now it's mostly back to normal. The international pool, which is what you guys are applying for. Um, Affirmative action banned. Jury's still out. What exactly is going to happen from this? How it might affect students coming out of the Philippines. Standardized tests, it's polarizing. You have a lot of forces saying we should all be test blind, right? And you have a lot of forces who are really insisting that it's important and required it. Like 1 year after COVID, they already started requiring it. Okay, popular schools, popular majors, they say this is just a product of, I think, capitalism. More and more demand, more people want these things, right? Fixed supply, low admissions acceptance rates, right? Deferrals, wait lists, it's just a product of, again, the chaos, right? The students and the schools, it's harder to predict what's going to happen. So both ways are deferring more, right? Pushing the decision later. Right, wait lists are happening a lot more. More and more students are in wait lists. Early being the new regular, I think like even when I applied to college again about 15 years ago, it wasn't like a given that you applied early. Of course, it was an advantage. Everyone on the most part knew that, but it wasn't like an obvious given, like you must apply early. These days, I feel like one of the first things I hear from new parents and students I talk to is, like, oh, I heard I need to apply early. Um, Basically, everyone doesn't know, right? And I do think the advantage is it's overstated. Depending on the school or the decision specifically, it can it can give you an advantage, but I don't think it's as like dramatic as people make it out to be. But the point is, either way, early has become somewhat the new regular. Um, with that, the early acceptance rates have also been going down a lot, right? There's a lot more, applications. The costs going up a lot, right? I think the last discussion about financial aid also going up a lot, right? So, yeah, higher costs, higher opportunities. Okay, so just some final thoughts, right? There's going to be a couple bullet points, so we're not going to end with this cynical, point. But yeah, unfair system advantages, it's going to still exist, right? Like legacy admissions going away, great. They could add yet another thing. They're doing like video interviews, like some schools. Different things are going to change over the next several years, but just life, right? Um, these are still going to be factors, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, I thought this headline, or the part I underlined, highlighted examples of what I mean by unfair advantages, right? So like legacy, donors, right? Like yeah, faculty members, certain VIPs. Yeah, it's a lot of advantages you can still get. Athletic recruits, this is a big trend, especially I think the last 15 years. So not just that you play a sport or that you're on the varsity team, but if you're like really good or good enough to showcase to possibly like make an influence in the college, um, yeah, this is a very common way to get a leg up, right? So if I cut the tail end of the last talk, I think it was Kian who was saying something about like applying to a less intense major. That's definitely a very popular strategy, and it's a good idea if you can support it. Right, and similar to that, I thought this was kind of funny, right? Fencing, there's like so six figures or like $100,000 plus, right? Costs to train, right, in this like Manhattan training center. But apparently it's like a very common breeder into good colleges, right? Ivy Leagues and other elite universities. Um, right. So when I was talking about like these unfair advantages, yeah, like money, resources, investment, et cetera, was always going to be an advantage. Okay, because like you were saying, right, colleges have to fill up these programs. They have to fill up their not just their athletics, right? Their music programs and all these other um, facilities, resources, programs that they have. Okay, depth is more important than breadth. Okay, so just because you only have a few activities you've done, your college, your high school doesn't allow you really to do so many things. That's not inherently a problem. Um, it's always been better that you do like three things or even two or three things like really well and deep, right, than scattering across like 10 different things and like not really doing much in any of them. Okay, so I thought this article was kind of interesting. Um, I didn't like read into the methodology of this, so I wouldn't take this so literally. This also probably depends on what kind of school, what college you're talking about. But this study that this research this guy did, um, actually I don't know about if it's this like Jeff Grabmeyer specifically, but this article featured research, and the conclusion I think was that yeah, the students who submitted all these extra activities, they didn't have any advantage in their acceptance rate, right? Just like maybe all else equal. Um, yeah, so a lot of times, right, when I chat with students, you guys probably are thinking the same thing, like, all right, what can I do to get into the school, right? What does like Stanford want to see, right? What should I write my essay? What do admissions officers want to read? Um, think less of that. Think more about yourself, right? Why do you deserve to go there? What makes you special? The fit itself is important, and that you can establish after, right? But it's like look inward more than like, yeah, like how do I join? How do I join? Like their picture. Okay, and I really like this. If you guys remember the scene, I forgot which Spider-Man this was. Right, he's like begging for the suit, right? I'm nothing without the suit. Right? I think it's a similar point, right? Some people I think have an attitude, a lot of parents, right, that um, like you need Harvard to be amazing, right? When the reality is, I think, right, a lot of students who get into Harvard, they were amazing to get in, right? Then what makes them amazing after is more them than the school. It's a lot more them than the school, right? So um yeah, so again, I guess that theme would, right, just focus on your on what makes you unique, right? Why you deserve the spot, not okay. So fit, your story, your the application quality is maybe very obvious advice, but um this is what's going to be very important. And in these days, unfortunately, we talked about grade inflation, even test scores, right? The hard number specs, the basic strategies, right? The formula of how to write an essay, these like all these elements have become very quality, right? And it's partially because of things like Chem they've done a great job for I will say 10 years. I think it's been around. I don't remember exactly, but stuff like Chem stuff. There's a lot of resources online, right? YouTube, Reddit, a lot of consultants have gotten pretty mainstream. It's like a pretty common service now. Right, a lot of good advice out there. A lot of bad advice as well, right? So make sure you get many opinions. Um, but uh, um, but yeah, with that, it's getting harder and harder, right? So um, yeah. But anyway, this theme is pretty much the same. Okay, just a quick like if ever you want to continue this conversation, my company we do give free short initial chats. Just reach out to our company. I'll give information on the next slide. If you want to set up a quick chat, happy to do so. If you guys want to just email a couple of questions, that's also no problem. But we do have paid services offline and online. We run offline sessions in BGC. We also do online as well. So for all the test prep, we do more things than what's even on here. But test prep, academic tutorials, admissions consulting. If you guys ever need any help or interested, feel free to reach out. Yeah, and this is our information. Feel free to check us out. All right. Oh, okay, right on the dot. There's like 2 minutes left, I guess. I don't know if we'll be able to get questions. Actually, Jasmine, should I just answer any of these Q&As or?
Yeah, if you would like me to moderate, I can definitely do that. But if you prefer to choose which ones you'd like to answer them, that's definitely fine as well.
Okay. I'll try to do this really quickly. All right. What part of the application was important? Yeah. So, first question I'm seeing, like grades most important. Like your supplementary test scores, I would say are the second most important. It's just these days that those two things have become a given. And then your extracurriculars, your essays, the rest of it adds into forming that person behind that. Even that has become so hard to differentiate. But yeah, those are all very important. How can we prepare the SAT? Okay, so Khan is obviously a popular one. Princeton Review, right? We're a franchise partner of theirs. They're about to release their own um like full suite of computerized practice tests and practice materials. So um that's another good resource. I would say because the test is so new, you want to stick to the brand name companies, right? Including Khan, which is free, right? But you want to stick to those. The more you deviate from those, the less quality you're going to get. And in fact, there'll be like mistakes. And um, so yeah, it's a hard question to answer. How to prepare for test prep is really depends on like where you're at, what you need, your like potential in general. If you have a question about this, for sure we can help you with that. So yeah, even in like a free like advice way. So just reach out to our office. Students applying high selective schools. Yeah, what are some strategies that have proven to be effective? That's again also really hard to answer like in this way. But the common ones I talked about before, right? Like applying to specific majors or avoiding rather very popular ones in certain schools, very popular. Steering into certain differentiating factors, right? That used to be more of a common strategy, right? Like a lot of people would really try to cast a light on maybe their LGBT background, right? Or their financial circumstances growing up. Um, but even that has become somewhat cliche these days, right? So really depends. This one, it's like this one needs to be discussion on a case by case basis. Applying for less intense major. So like yes and no. I mean, you have to have the story still for it. This is not this is so common also. Like most students, most parents are aware of this also. So they push their kids to apply to the most random things. And believe it or not, even like marine biology or something in whatever college, even that will have a lot of competition. Um, so yeah, it's better than applying to, let's say, computer science. Um, like if you have a choice of computer science and like marine biology and you can genuinely support both, probably your chances are better with marine biology. Um, what do you recommend? SAT, ACT, it doesn't matter. It depends, whatever fits you better. So they're both good. Um, I would take a diagnostic for both, and then if you want to have a chat with us about it more specific to your situation, feel free to reach out. Plastic book enough. There's no one book that's enough for anybody. It depends, right? So if you need a lot of work, like one book is probably not going to be enough, right? Like even like like 3 months of prep is probably not going to be enough to maximizing your score. Some students will study for SAT for more than a year, right? Some students, let's say who have stronger content bases, they'll finish the test within like 10 hours of sessions, maybe just like 3 to 5 practice tests. So it really depends. Oh, I think I answered this one already. Um, okay, so oh, sorry, I did not realize I had more time. I thought I saw somewhere it was until 5. My fault. All right. Okay, great. If there are more questions, I didn't need to rush that so much. Um, I guess of the ones that I really rush answered, if someone wants to ask it again because they want like more detail, like just yeah, feel free to type it again. I don't mind going back into it. Um,
Actually, I think that the most recent admission trend would be like what you mentioned, the affirmative action being removed. Can you like talk more about how that is going to affect Filipinos in particular, if there will be any kind of affect to us?
yeah, sure. So why it's more of just like an interesting news piece, and I don't think it'll affect any of you guys, is in affirmative action, I think like the groups that it really targeted were like blacks and Latinos, right? As like this article, I don't know if I so I'm just quoting actually this article here or um where was it? Uh yeah, the bottom there, right? You see Bleemer found that black and Latino students enrolled at less competitive campuses. It was always focused on them, right? This affirmative action policy. right? Both on like the good and bad side of it. So while like Asians are still considered a minority, actually it was the Asians who were complaining about affirmative action, like to begin with, right? They were like the new voice that pushed this, I think, over the edge, right? They thought affirmative action was like reverse discrimination against Asians. It was making it harder for Asians to get in. Um, so it's hard to say because like these Asians who are complaining are the ones who are getting very good like SAT scores, right? Like Koreans, Chinese who have like the highest SAT, average SAT going into these colleges. Um, they were complaining. So, it's like so Philippines is in that like Asian group, right? We need to like check the box of your background. You guys are in that group. But at the same time, you guys are not really like in that group at the same time, right? It's like this UC what is it? Sorry, the UC this table, right? That showed this breakdown. And for sure all these colleges, like they're not counting the Asians as like one absolute number, right? They are trying to, or they were trying to diversify, right, among the different ethnicities, and they still will, right? Um, so some like insider experts, they think this affirmative action thing it is still mostly like for now at least it's mostly for show still. Like it's mostly for the headline. It's not like how much will this affect the internal discussions in the admissions teams. It's hard to say, right? Some colleges might take it really seriously, right? Like already, like in this pool, in this coming pool, right? They might already like be very black and white with it. But some may enforce a little bit more loosely. Okay, so this is where like all the colleges themselves, they have their different personalities, right, and their different cultures. Um, but also, the colleges are also run by people in the end, right? And the people are not robots. You guys are not submitting an app to an AI, right? Like these are people who are using subjective judgment in the end, right? So yeah, so like simple conclusion is I don't think it will affect this coming application cycle, especially for Filipinos. And I don't expect it to affect much even moving forward beyond that. Because you guys are, yeah, Filipinos are like somewhat in like the middle of both. Like they're right, just like all the Asians, right? Again, they're minorities, but they're also not like the overrepresented group. I mean, sorry, they're also not the like underrepresented. They're not really looked at either. Um, let's see. Well, so I'm looking at the chat. Let's see. I'm taking my gap year now. I'm taking an internship. Just to do something else. Um, yeah. So I think in the last chat, right, they're talking about like merit versus like financial aid, right? So financial aid, there are a lot of schools where if you just get in, pretty much like if you can prove you don't have enough income or support, then it's like a full partial or full ride depending, right? That would always be simpler than a merit scholarship, which usually depends on which one, I guess, but usually these are really competitive. Um, so yeah, I guess with your gap year, I don't know if I guess it's you didn't get in yet, right, to the school, right? Some students will get in and then they'll defer, right? They'll have a gap year and then start enrollment 1 year later. I assume you haven't gotten in yet. You're applying this fall. With that, I mean, it's good you're keeping busy, but you doing an internship or like one other activity, um, that'll help, but it's not going to move the needle that much, right? Like I think like most of what's going to matter for your application, you've already done. Um, you know, like let's say you don't have an SAT score. I think getting like a 1500 on the SAT would help more than you adding another activity, right, in this past year. Um, okay, but if your story, like if you want to, what is it, like double or triple down on your like your passion, right, your claimed academic direction, then that's always nice to do. Sure, right? Like I mean, if this coming year, and at the extreme, right, if you do something incredible, right, that like, I don't know, like just like a superficial example, if you're like, I don't know, you like make it to the Olympics or something for or Olympic level talent in something, or you're able to demonstrate that, then of course that'll help. Okay, shift for an SAT to digital, important things to take note. Okay, so important things to take note. I feel like this question matters more if you're actually choosing between the two. But you cannot even take the old one anymore. So with the current digital one, okay, I guess what sucks about the current digital one is there aren't that many practice materials for it, right? Like the past SAT, you had like 5 years, right, of like official exams, which are just the highest quality of materials. Right, you didn't have people like paraphrasing all the stuff and then like losing some like of that, you know, activity. So that's what sucks about the new one, right? You just don't have that much practice. I think on the Blue Book app or the College Board thing, five, you have four official practice tests on the PSAT, right? So you only have five official exams, not a lot at all. That's what sucks about it. What's nice about it, it is a lot more comfortable than the previous ones, right? You like the reading is only like one paragraph now, which is very pleasant, right? The old one, you had like, like a page full of text, right? Like of like passages. We have five of them. So it is more pleasant. There isn't really an easier or harder. We had some students last cycle who did take both, who took the past one and the digital one, and the scores were like pretty much the same. So, um, it's like, and that makes sense though, because College Board, they internally are trying to align it to be the same, right? They didn't make it digital to like change the exam fundamentally. It's still testing the same things. It's the same, almost the same curriculum and question types, very similar. They just added like some things that are a little bit different. They wanted to shift the curriculum focus a little bit, like a little bit. Um, but I think it's mostly like test security, right? When they made it digital, now, right, like things like cheating is much less of a thing, right? They can eventually also make more dates, right? They don't have to administer it only like 6, 7 times a year. They can, if it's digital, maybe in 10 years, maybe it'll be like every week it's available, right? Maybe. So yeah, other things to know, digital SAT. Um, I mean, there like everything else would be like very minor things that I don't think matter that much. Like they don't make a big difference. Like you can use your calculator now for the whole math, right? There's a Desmos calculator built into the test, which Desmos is awesome, right? It's a very handy tool, right, for things like SAT. So that's nice, but that advantage is an advantage for everybody. So it's like, will it affect the curve, or will it affect your score? Not really. Um, um, hmm. So yeah, I personally like actually the current the digital SAT more than the ACT. I like it more, um, but like marginally so. The ACT is also it's also similar, right? ACT is just for me. I find a little more stressful because of the uh, the time, right? You're like sprinting through the ACT, right? The reading and science, it's like very short time for like quite a lot of questions that um yeah, it's like if you want to avoid that anxiety and stress, the SAT gives you a lot more time per question. Um, but they're both good exams. How has getting an international degree from Duke affected you? Oh, great. Okay, yeah. So I like this question a lot. Yeah. So, the many reasons why you want to go to a whatever college, right? And how it like lives on with you as you get older. So, I think one of the big reasons that a lot of people like the college they go to is actually the network, right? The friends they meet, the friends they make, right? Yeah, connections that can help on a personal level or even on a career level down the road. I think that for sure is a very real thing. Um, some colleges also will have like a very unique or specific program or resources that are available, right? That you can only really get at that one college. So for me, actually, neither of those were that important for me. I think what going to do on the practical side, where it really helped me a lot, I think it gave me what is it? I think getting my first job was probably easier than if I had gone to a worse school. So I started as a derivatives trader, and there were a lot of like banks and funds that recruited directly on our campus, right? They would like set up shop for a few days in our school, right? And then just have interviews for Duke students, right? As they would for a lot of the other competitive school, like the good schools. Um, they definitely will not be doing this for, I don't know, like schools outside of the top 50 or top 100, right? You'll have these companies who, let's say they're based on like the East Coast, they're going to fly to the West Coast to like Stanford because Stanford is so good, right? They'll do this for Stanford as well, right? So if you want, I guess like um, yeah, advantages like that, right? And it being on your resume, of course, it's like a lifelong stamp, right? Not so much that like I learned like not so much that the student learned something so special while there, right? But it's just like, Duke gave me the stamp out of high school, right? In the same way that my MBA then gave me a stamp at that time, right? So there is that practical side of it, right? It is something that um, can help you in your career long run. Um, Beyond the practical side of it, I really enjoyed my time at Duke. There's a lot of memories that I think about like every day, quite literally, good and bad, right? So yeah, it's like any other experience, right? 4 years of your life is a long time. Like any other experience, it enriches your personality and your way of thinking, and um, so like that's I guess how it's more relevant in my life today. Things like Duke basketball, very cliche for me to bring that up, but if anyone who likes basketball here at Duke's basketball it's like awesome, right? It's like the best brand for basketball. Um, so yeah, stuff like that. It's like it's such a minor thing, but it's like a big part of day-to-day life. Like not really, sorry, not a big part of day-to-day life. It's a big part of it's a fun part of the year for not just me, but a lot of other my Duke friends and Duke alumni I know, right? We get together to watch games. Um, like the media coverage, the YouTube clips, there's like constant, there's all this new content that comes out all the time. Um, yeah, and the alumni resources, alumni networks, even the Philippines, there's like a pretty good Duke alumni network. Different schools will have bigger, bigger and smaller presences, right, for things like this, right? Like UPenn's uh, community in the Philippines, I think, is quite large, right? UPenn generally takes a lot of students from the Philippines, right? So that's like a pretty popular alumni network to be a part of. Um, yeah, beyond that, like, well, how can colleges really affect your guys' life? You guys might meet your partner, right? Like your husband or wife, or right, your partner. That's a very common thing also for a lot of students. Um, not majority, but I know a lot of like campus couples that eventually got married. Um, yeah, best friends. Um, if you're trying to get into grad school, right, like med school, law school, for sure, there are some schools that are like known feeders into different grad schools, right? Or they give you like a specific advantage. Um, okay, old written SAT test would still be enough to prepare. Um, mm, so yeah, the old written SAT test would. Okay, it's a tough question to answer because it's like if you can get a really good score on the old test, there's no reason why you cannot get a really good score on the new one, right? The skills are very translatable for sure. Um, but as I say that, it kind of depends on how you learned to do the old test. Like it's like, what is it? Regardless of your score range, right? I feel like some tutors, not just for SAT, right? Even for like IB math or something, some tutors or teaching methods will like, like if you're in this like picture of situation, then just like like draw this line, cross this out, like pick B, like it's like you're like not really understanding what's going on. You're just trying to get the answer right, right? If you learn it that way, if you're looking for very superficial things, then the translation may not be as good, right? Because the question types do change, right? I mean, there are enough different things. But if you like build your actual reading skills, right? Your active reading skills, your reading habits improve, your understanding of grammar, your math is fundamentally stronger through the old one. That will absolutely translate to the new one. Um, right. So yeah, like a quick answer. I don't know if this will give the right perspective. If you can get if you can like, you're definitely a 1500 student on the old one, but for some reason you're getting like a 1200 on the digital one. If that's like the real value of where you're at, um, give me like 3 hours with you, right? And you're gonna for sure correct that. It's gonna go above 1500 on the new one, right? Like the exams are they're the same. Like content, I mean, like, sorry, they're not the same. They're like close cousins.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much, Simon. So that concludes our Q&A session. Thank you so much for your active participation, everyone. I hope that Simon was able to shed light on your questions and concerns, both for admission trends and anything test prep. So for any additional questions or for anyone curious about Princeton Review Philippines, please take note of the contact information Simon shared. You will also receive an email later on for more information about Princeton Review Philippines. So on behalf of CAMP's 2023 facilitation team, I would like to extend our sincerest gratitude and appreciation to you for sharing with us your valuable insights today. We are deeply grateful for your time, Simon, and effort in partnering with us for this informative talk. And with that, Day 3 of Pathfinder has officially concluded. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again tomorrow. Thank you,
Great. Thank you,
everyone, and
guys.
thank you, Simon.
Bye.